Good evening and welcome to the monthly ZWAC show of the Northern California Recycling Association, or NCRA as we call it. I am your host, John Moore. We at NCRA are proud that some of the best of zero waste advocacy has begun right here in Northern California, like the movement focusing on recovery of surplus food, or keeping methane producing organic material out of landfill, and resisting the fiction that we can recycle our way out of excess discarded petrochemical plastics. Likewise, we're in a hotbed of successful local waste businesses, which is important because if we are to have a circular economy, we first need to have an economy. So tonight we feature two homegrown zero waste advocates, actually three. First, we will hear excerpts from the recycling archives about longtime Sonoma County advocate and former NCRA board member, Mike Anderson. Next, I will interview the operators of Berkeley's Metro Lighting, Lawrence Groen and Christa Rybczynski, who will discuss their vision of engaging local artisans to use some post-secondary materials to make artistic and sustainable lighting fixtures. Each of these advocates have very different backstories, but zero waste is their unifying principle, as is this monthly show. And with that, I will turn it over to Susan, the director of the Recycling Archives, to talk about Mike Anderson.
Great, thanks a lot, John. Well, Dan Knapp and Mary Lou Van Devender interviewed Mike Anderson, I think it was back in like 2012 or so.
2007.
Okay. And then recently, Dan has worked with Mike to update it. So we have his latest information. And I want to tell you about Mike. I found Mike Anderson's interview to be a really powerful story. And I mean that in a number of different ways, including that it's a story about power. Who has power, who wants power, how they handle power, and what the consequences are. Some handle it badly, but others, and this includes Mike, use power for good purposes. As Mike explains, my dad was a colonel in the Air Force. So when I was a boy, we moved all the way from Alaska to Florida to Illinois to New Mexico, all over the place. I was the oldest of 5 kids, and I was also the smallest. I was almost always the smallest of my classes, too. I was in 20 different schools by the time I graduated from high school. So I'd be enrolled in a new school in the middle of the semester, and as the smallest kid, bullies would come at me. That's why I learned to fight. That's how I chose to fight. Stop the bullies, then they'll never come back again. Well, Mike describes himself as always having been a fighter, but he also used a lot of intelligence and political smarts to win battles. For one, he says, I've got a photographic memory that I honed early in my life. When you skip from Alabama to Washington, there's a new teaching method. There's always a new way of learning math or whatever, and what you learned at the last school just doesn't work. So I've learned to have a photographic memory where I can do the work and learn the new program right away. The best way I can describe it is to ask a question like, what's the meaning of this mathematical term? I can see thousands of pages go right by me in just a few seconds. Then I can find where the term is and read it and know what the term is all about. I don't know what that is, but it's like seeing photographic stuff. Now, the additional way that Mike tells about winning battles is through politics. And that started very early when he was a college student. Politics even indirectly led to his getting into recycling. And as he tells this story, I was a young Republican in student government at Long Beach, California State University. I wanted to use politics as a way to move forward towards goals and ideals that I had, but I ran for student body president in 1972 and I lost. I'm quite sure that if I would have won the office of student body president that year, in just a few years, I would have been an assemblyman or even a state senator from Southern California. However, I knew a fellow named David Kajiyama who ran the Long Beach State Recycling Center. And after that loss, with his help, that summer I went to the recycling center to work. For me, working at the startup recycling center was a political stepping stone to get back into student government. So that's how I got into recycling. As a student, I knew from a futurist point of view that recycling was a movement and that it was going to be there for a long time. So eventually, Mike did get back into student government, and one thing he did during that term was to increase the funding for the recycling center. After graduating, he followed David Kajiyama north to Sonoma County, where he became a volunteer warehouse worker at the local county recycling center. And this is where he was called on to use another one of his strengths. Mike says, I was invited to a board meeting of the Sonoma County Recycling Center, where the then director had threatened that if he didn't get the money and the equipment he wanted, he was going to resign. The board had learned from my wife, who was also a volunteer at the recycling center, that I was a parliamentarian. If you know the formal rules for running meetings and abide by them, you set yourself up for wins. I studied Robert's Rules of Order and used them early and throughout my working life to increase my authority while making the organizations that I love work better. The Recycling Center's board wanted me to attend the meeting and advise them how to cope with the differences between the board and the president. So there I was at the meeting, and the president didn't get what he wanted. So I gave them his written resignation. The board said to me, now what do we do? And I said, well, you got to look for another president. That resignation is effective immediately. He's resigned, so he's out now. A few days later, the board offered me the job of running the recycling center as the new president. And a few months after that, I sat down with my new board and we decided to sponsor a contest to name the recycling center, with the naming contest as publicity. I'd had a bachelor's and master's in marketing research, and I'd done marketing for some companies in the past. And I knew that a key to making the recycling center work was getting the word out to the community. Sponsoring a contest to name our recycling center was one of the first steps I made toward getting us some favorable publicity. And a 5th grade girl won the contest with the name Garbage Reincarnation. And that's how we got our name, Garbage Reincarnation. And then with the people working for me, we became very, very active in politics. I loved it. We matched and then overmatched the garbage companies. We had a newsletter that we put out called the Sometimes Monthly Recycle Rag, which would tell it like it is. I just loved politics. And when the garbage companies pushed back at us, our newsletter would go out and tell the public what they were doing. It went to a mailing list of 6,000 active recyclers. It also went out to every single political person in Sonoma County, plus their aides. So the politicians were aware of what was going on in recycling. We would go up in front of the city council and fight the garbage companies, even though we couldn't match the garbage companies money-wise and campaign-wise in contributions, and sometimes we would win big. So my use of politics was a driving force of garbage reincarnation. So in Sonoma County, Mike, who had started as a Republican, moved from a libertarian to an independent to helping Democrats get elected each election cycle. He became well known to local, regional, and statewide political officials. Mike says it's been a constant transition because it was the Democrats that I needed to work with politically to be able to offset the Republicans who were financing the garbage companies. I just really got bummed out with what the Republicans did to this country. Unfortunately, they didn't always protect him from being jumped and punched out by garbage goons. Mike tells this story. It was 1976, and David Kajiyama, who is now on my board of directors, was over at my office working on a project, and it was getting dark. I went out the door of my office, and I got jumped by a couple of garbage thugs and beaten up pretty bad. They told me, you stay out of the garbage. You stay out of the garbage or we're going to kill you. David came out, heard this, and started to do kung fu. He chased them off. I couldn't eat solid food for a couple of months after that happened, but he was out there on the hood of their car going, wah, wah, wah. Besides fighting recyclers, garbage companies were fighting each other. So the county tried to bring peace by carving up the territory and giving each garbage company an exclusive right to all the recyclables. Mike knew he had to stop that if recycling was going to be successful in Sonoma County. So he explains, you see, the garbage companies think if it's in their territory, all the stuff that people throw away is their stuff. Dan, who's interviewing him, says, but they couldn't get the police to enforce that, so they used goons? And Mike said, oh, yes, they did. What happened is There were always garbage wars in Sonoma County because the big garbage companies were gobbling up the little guys. And then in 1976, the county was going to carve it up so that all the garbage companies would get exclusive recycling contracts in the zones where they already had exclusives for garbage. I got alerted by the public works director, who didn't like what was going on, and he invited me and two other members of my staff to sit on the county's solid waste management committee. And we stopped the county recyclables from being carved up into all these exclusive licensing territories. And then we at Garbage Reincarnation started to go out and pick up cardboard and office paper for free wherever the garbage companies were charging customers to take it. The businesses generating the cardboard loved that. We started all kinds of different recycling programs that the garbage guys didn't like. So they were constantly trying to stop us or knock us out. Once when I was working at an offsite in 1979, I had to pick up some recyclables for somebody. I drove one of our recycling trucks to the supplier, and I left my car overnight at the recycling center. The next day, I returned to my car and was driving away, but there were kids playing out in the recycle yard. I tried to honk my horn, but my horn didn't work. I was planning to go on the freeway and go to Santa Rosa, but I wanted my mechanic to look at my horn first. So he checked it out and found that my steering column had been disconnected, intentionally disconnected. And whoever did the deed accidentally disconnected the horn too. He said, Mike, if you'd gone on that freeway, you would have lost control of your car. Now, who knows who did that? Mary Lou, who was also interviewing Mike, says, do you think that if you'd been a good and quiet boy and hadn't been so feisty in public, that your recycling center would have experienced fewer ups and downs? And Mike said, no, I'd be a dead dog. You had to have somebody feisty because these garbage guys were very aggressive. You had to have somebody feisty, someone who would fight back and have the political know-how to take them on and open up the disposal business to competition from recycling. We didn't kill the garbage companies, but we kept ourselves alive as long as we were feisty. Now, one of the projects that Mike said he's most proud about is the way that Tanya Levy used all the information in his files to fight a garbage burning plant. Mike says about Tanya, she was like a pit bull. She came to us in 1977. She'd been reading an article in the newspaper about a 5-county garbage burning plant being proposed for Sonoma County and found that we were fighting it. She joined us right away as part of a school project. Very soon, she went through the files in my office and got all the information I had about garbage burning. I just turned her loose and she was like a pit bull. Let her loose and she won't let go. The background is that the California Waste Management Board decided in 1976 that they were going to have 35 garbage burning plants operating in California by 1985. Their idea was to replace most of our old landfills with this new technology that could burn everything that used to be buried, and produce electricity, they said, safely. The first one, a big one, was going to be put in Sonoma County, with 4 other counties bringing their compacted garbage to us to burn. We organized the community against it, and we lobbied the supervisors, and we won. In a 4-to-1 vote, the supervisors pulled out of the plant. That killed the first garbage burning power plant ever proposed in the state. The defeat made Tanya's research paper, which she titled Garbage to Energy, the False Panacea, well known all over California, the USA, and ultimately the whole world. It was a major reason garbage burning got defeated all over California and elsewhere as well. It was crammed full of information and it didn't dumb the argument down. I saw that the recycling movement was still in its infancy in most places where the waste to energy idea was being promoted. Local recyclers were not going to be able to fight off the powers that be just by doing the ethical and the moral thing. And so Garbage Reincarnation stepped into the breach by making money to support Tanya and our advocacy. I built a money-making organization around me to be able to do things like getting someone on the Californians Against Waste Board of Directors to fight for the bottle bill and to fight against the garbage burning plants. I wanted an organization that could fight for the markets. I built that money-making machine around me so we could fund what needed to be done. We were traveling all over the country, speaking and making good trouble. And so with this false panacea report, what I did is to make hundreds of copies on our own with our own money. Then I went to Sacramento and I carried those reports into every single California legislator's mailbox. And then I put another one in their top aides mailbox because I knew politics in Sacramento. The politicians probably weren't going to read it, but their aides, if they saw an issue being discussed and there was something juicy in there, they would read it. And so every single politician and every board of supervisors in the state and every high-ranking politician in Sonoma County got a copy of it. We imagined that when the garbage boys or the big engineering firms walked in saying, hey, we can save you, we can get rid of your garbage problem and make energy for you, then the aide would come up and tug on the state senator's sleeve and say, see this little book here? It says burning garbage won't work. This report has all kinds of backup information about toxics and facts that are interesting. You'd better take a look at it before you take that step. And that's what happened. Again, that's politics combined with a futurist look. We also got reviewed in Whole Earth Catalog, so we were getting known all over the country. That's what I feel really good about. I've done a lot of things that enabled our movement to jump over the hurdle of destructive disposal. Dan asked the question, has your work been financially rewarding? And Mike at first doesn't really even understand the question. He says, no, that's down at the bottom of my goals in life. I got my master's degree in marketing. I could have gone to work for a big corporation making $300,000 or as much as $1 million a year. Thinking about that kind of finance is very, very low for me. I'm teaching my son and my brothers that this capitalist system that we're working under is destroying the earth that we have inherited. We have to start looking at a different way of paying people for what they do in life. So eventually Mike had a parting of the ways with garbage reincarnation when some of his ideas for the future didn't fly with its board of directors. Mike describes that as, yeah, it was really very, very painful. I find when you talk to people about what drives them, it's hard for them not to think in financial terms. And when you don't come up with a financial reason for being, it's hard for people to fathom. But you get by with what you can get by with. And if you're good at it, you do it whether you have money or you don't. Well, there are so many more stories in Mike's interview. It's definitely worth reading. Especially, it's thoughtful about the many different ways that power doesn't have to mean bullying and brute strength. Instead, determined organizing, research, and strategy can upend even the biggest giants and make way for advances and innovations that benefit the earth, or to put it in Mike's terms, that save Gaia, Mother Earth.
Well, thank you, Susan, for that typically lovely and dramatic reading. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but since you talked about reading the full interview, is there a way that people can do that?
They will soon be able to. We have to do a little bit more formatting on it, but if they they contact us, either Dan or me, we'll be able to give them this new one, the whole one, soon.
Okay. Can you put your email in the chat, maybe?
Sure.
I was hoping Mike would be here because one of the things you said really struck me, and maybe Dan, who interviewed him, might be able to fill in his answer. It takes a certain personality, feistiness, to really like politics, and it sounded like he really loved politics. What would he say about what he loved about it? Do you know, Dan?
Well, yeah, I think he had a broad view of politics. It was much more than electoral politics. Of course, it included electoral politics. One of my best answers to that, it's kind of a background piece here. I have a PhD in sociology, so I, read about this quite a long time ago. And there was a man named Harold Lasswell, and he came up with a definition of politics that I think fits what we do when we do our advocacy and all the rest. And it is, politics is the process of deciding who gets what, where, when, and how. If you look at it that way, you're looking at a very complex process that goes way beyond electoral politics, but includes it. And I think democracy is one of the best things that we've ever invented. And I know that it's under assault right now. And I think we better wake up and make sure that we save it, because otherwise we're going to have autocracy, and we will have a kind of a politics that will kill people and call it saving the earth. They'll do all sorts of things that are just Orwellian in scope and content. You don't want that. You want a politics that's open. We've made use of, for example, when we run into trouble, one of the things we've done very successfully to turn things around is to use the citizens' initiative. And in that process, which is inherently democratic, you go out and first you write the thing. So there's a bunch of whereases that establish the logical and scientific basis for whatever you want to do. And then there's a bunch of therefores saying what you're actually going to do now that everybody agrees with all the whereases. And then you get people to sign it, and then it goes on the ballot if you are successful. And then the voters get to decide. And if they decide, which they did, garbage burning, for example, in the city of Berkeley, that's how we stopped the incinerator. The council had voted along with the staff who didn't vote, but they were advising. They voted unanimously to build a garbage burning incinerator at 2nd and Gilman. It would have been a terrible, terrible mistake. But they voted unanimously to do it. And we tried to stop it by first talking to them. We had about a year to do that. We were only able to get 4 of them to change their minds. There were 9. So we were still in the minority. And at that point, the whole thing hardened up and became very adversarial. And it just wasn't going to change. So what we did was we wrote the initiative it was called Measure U. We got it on the ballot. It passed the city of Berkeley voters by 63%. We did it again later with another initiative called Measure D. It was an Alameda County-wide initiative, passed with 63%, set up the Alameda County Source Reduction and Recycling Board, financed it with a tipping fee surcharge on garbage, and that generated about $8 million a year for capitalizing recycling. It's been one of the truly large success stories. And we use the Citizens Initiative, which is an inherently wonderful tool of direct democracy. So I think that I know that Mike would appreciate and acknowledge all of this. I know too that he has a monthly call with his son at exactly our time, and I think that's where he is right now.
Well, thanks for filling in for him and describing the political success. You don't hear a lot about political successes, and unfortunately in Sonoma County, I didn't have very many, so good on him for doing that. So since we don't have Mike to ask questions of, I'm going to move on to Metro Lighting, and I see that we have Lawrence and Christa from Metro Lighting. Thank you for coming. Christa, you are guest 1 on the screen, but I think you're Christa Rybczynski, right? And you're muted. Okay. So I wanted to ask first, and I'll just toss out questions to the 2 of you. Tell us a little about the business of Metro Lighting. What do you do?
Okay. First, I want to say thank you, Dan, for all that advocacy work in Berkeley. Berkeley would be a very different place without you. So awesome. So Metro Lighting, we design and build lighting fixtures. We've got our own metal shop here on site, and we work with a number of local glass artisans to make shades for us. Christa and I met in architecture school in 1984, and got married in Cincinnati, and we got here in 1990. Actually, Christa, you can mute for while I'm talking. The camera's getting an echo. So when we started out, we we were designing and building our own lighting fixtures, our metalwork, mostly in brass, that sort of the way they used to be built, with mechanical connections so they can be recycled and repaired. And we mostly were buying our glass from a company in France, but eventually they went out of business. And at that point, we decided to be all about made in California. So we were already working with some local glass artists, but we really pumped up production of those pieces and added new ones since then.
So Lawrence, it sounds like you were the founder of the company. So I'll ask you, why in the world did you choose this kind of a business to go into?
So when we first moved to California, it was 1990, and we were fresh out of architecture school. And the recession that had already hit Ohio, when we were still there, it seemed that California was still doing well. But by the time we got here, all the firms that we had been talking to that said, yeah, get here and we'll set up an interview, were saying, oh, we just laid off people and we can have an informational interview, but we can't really hire anyone right now. So I took a job at Omega Salvage, thinking that would be fun. And I learned about the salvage industry, which could inform my architecture. But one of the things that happened was I fell in love with lighting. I had repaired and restored hundreds of lighting fixtures. Yeah, that's good.
I was going to move here. I was across the desk. It seemed weird.
And then when Christa was pregnant with our first child, I had my first midlife crisis and decided
At 27.
we should start our own business. Had the lighting bug and had been designing sort of some fun fixtures out of recycled components and new components, and decided to put that to the test.
So for the people who don't know, tell us a little more about what Omega Salvage was in Berkeley. I don't think it might not even be in existence anymore.
It just closed. Omega Salvage just closed on April 15th, actually. After 48 years or something. They were found in the 70s. So yeah.
So they must have sold some high-end lighting fixtures, and that inspired you to start your own company to make them.
Well, the history of Omega was, from what I know, and Dan probably knows more about it than I do, but Vito Lab had started salvaging army barracks and getting recycled lumber in San Francisco, and then moved to Berkeley, actually right across the street from where we are now, Caddy Corner, into a brick building, and set up a kind of a commune, and they were doing recycling, architectural salvage, taking pieces out of old buildings and reselling them. And eventually that grew into a block down the street where they were selling, I don't know if it was that way always, but in 1990, when I started there, it was sort of, they had limited space, so they were kind of upscale architectural salvage. They were picky about what would come in the door, and they would put a high dollar amount on things.
They sold doors, windows, plumbing hardware, door handles, and then lighting and other kind of like mantles, woodwork, that kind of stuff. But you mostly were, I mean, a lot of the time you spent was taking out parts of things and rebuilding the antiques basically and rewiring them to make them sellable again. Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in the taking apart an old lighting fixture, buffing the brass, putting it back together, rewiring it, and finding among our salvage glass a good match architecturally, and then we'd hang it up and sell it as a restored fixture.
How did you get from restoring lighting fixtures to making lighting fixtures?
Well, the first fixtures I made were made from recycled components, pipes and heating elements, and just things that I found interesting. And then I met a guy named Terry, got his last name, but and he showed me, he kind of had a company. He had worked at a brass foundry and then started a line of historical lighting, and had catalogs of component parts that were very much like the ones I'd been using, but they were new components. And so I started putting those together and designing bent arms and learning about patina finishes from Terry. And at the time I was still working for Omega Salvage, and they had opened a second shop called Omega 2. And it was kind of my dream at the time to set up a custom lighting shop through Omega 2, where I would design fixtures and we'd put them up in the store, and then I'd make them for people and customize them if they needed. But because we had met Terry, who was really helping me out to learn the industry, Omega 2 started buying these fixtures from Terry. So it was no longer an option for me to do that through the company. And so I started making some fixtures on my own and through all of our network of architects and contractors that we knew.
Right. I was still working as an architect through that. And then we had a few, well, the big Oakland Berkeley fire happened, right, in 1991. All of that work kind of, all that brought a lot of work to the architecture firms. Then we had some historical preservation kind of projects through work that were being rebuilt, and people wanted their lights built exactly as they had been in their house that had burned down. Plus we got a couple of contracts through Noah's Bagels. So we started funneling some more work into Lawrence, and then I eventually quit that and started working with Metro. Oh, probably within a year after we started. Yeah.
So as it's evolved, what's the source of your materials? Where do you get them from?
So most of our brass components we've been buying from catalogs of companies that were making reproduction component parts. But as we are able to, we move more and more of those to local production. So there is a screw machine shop in West Berkeley over by Ashby Lumber, very close to Urban Ore, that is making all of our small churn components. And I'm going to grab a couple to show you what they look like.
Yeah, I was thinking about Christa's camera. It looks like it's showing on some of your goods, and I was going to ask somebody if you can to point to them and tell them what they are and how they're made.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we could go into the other room there that has the recycled things in it too.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely do that. So the small screw machine company makes parts like this where they're connectors. So that would be on one of our fixtures where a tubing arm is connecting to another component. So it makes a nice transition.
And that business is in West Berkeley. What's the name of it again?
Edward Kane Company.
Oh,
On the little dog leg across from what used to be the police station.
oh,
Lumber.
interesting.
And then we have parts that are spun, which are sheet metal components. So there's a blank that is turned on a lathe, sort of like pottery. There's a chuck, which is this shape. And then the metal is sort of pulled against that, and it forms to that chuck, and then the sheet metal part pops off. And those are made down in LA, Baldwin Park. So we've had more and more custom components made, so we're buying less from the catalogs. The catalogs, although the quality parts and they're solid brass, we don't have any control over where they're made, and some are made in India and some are made in China. And so we're trying to move as much as possible to made in California.
Do you buy most of your component parts as opposed to, say, salvaging and upcycling?
For most of our lines, yes. They're mostly new materials. But where we can, we have salvage components or repurposed components. We've got a couple ring chandeliers that we make that are built around a bicycle rim. And we can maybe walk around and show you those. The piece behind me, the arbor in the middle of that is actually a component from an IKEA bed frame. So we're sort of reusing the energy that has gone into designing and manufacturing that component into making it a lighting fixture component.
So who does the designing and who does the making?
We both do the designing and neither of us do the making. But we have 3 people that work in our shop. One's been with us for 16 years actually, and another for 10. And then our youngest child, who's 20, is working part-time back there now.
Yay.
So yeah, our oldest kid is 30, then 26, then 20. So did you ever talk about the bottle stuff?
No, I
Okay.
think we can get there next. But
Okay.
when we first started, it was me doing all the designing and building and marketing. Not doing terribly well at any of those. So when we started hiring employees to do that work, they quickly got better than I was. And
How do you do your marketing today?
we don't do that much marketing, really. We benefit a lot by having a storefront on a busy street. By
Mhm.
being in Berkeley, where there are a number of lighting companies, so people from the Bay Area come to Berkeley to shop for lighting. We do have a presence. We've got a website and Facebook and Instagram. But we mostly try to take really good care of our customers, and they keep coming back. And we've got people who come back for multiple houses full of lights after they sell and move.
I don't know much about designer lighting fixtures. Do styles change so that you have to adapt to changing interest from your buyers?
Yeah, and when we started, we did a lot more historical styles, arts and crafts, Art Nouveau, Craftsman, but some
Yeah, I'd say-
Victorian.
I'd say in the 90s, we had a lot of customers who were getting rid of their 70s and 80s stuff that somebody had come into their craftsman and put in, modernized. And they were restoring them to be more in
Authentic.
keeping with the historical architecture of their houses then. And now we're seeing a lot of people not wanting to do that, wanting to make it more open and modern and bright and good night,
Yeah,
Boone. See you tomorrow. Last day before the trip. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, definitely some things have changed over the years.
And a lot of our new designs kind of come out of collaborations with clients. We like to do problem solving. So if someone has a situation where, for example, they've got one junction box, but they want 3 pendants, we found progressively more elegant ways to solve that problem. And then in doing so, which will like make a plate, and then all the wiring's hidden within that plate, but they can have as many pendants as they want. That kind of system has become very flexible, and we make that with 3 or 5 or 16 pendants coming from them. So they've been over tables and in stairwells, 20 feet tall. And so each design kind of can sometimes have a life of its own, that it'll continue to evolve depending on who comes in the door and what their needs are.
Well, speaking of who comes in the door, what percentage of your customers are residential users as opposed to commercial?
Vast majority residential. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the commercial work we do, I would characterize as sort of residential in nature, like restaurants, maybe
Multi-housing.
multifamily housing or a lobby of a residential building, things like that. Yeah, and I did a check recently. About 15% of our work is totally custom work. So, we have quite a lot of our what we sell is kind of what we've already designed and have made and customized, but we also have, about 15% that's completely new designs that we make particularly for those customers. So.
Is that intentional, or would you grow the commercial side if you could?
I think we grow the commercial side. Those projects are fun. We've done some big restaurant jobs where, it's a, 30 fixtures in a space and there's kind of a theme, and we worked with an architect and all of that. Totally. It's a challenge, so it's fun, but
It's the same kind of challenge and the same skill set to do some lighting for a custom house, but in a commercial project, there tend to be a lot more of the fixtures and budget is less of an issue.
Well, I wondered for two reasons. One is, as I'm looking on the camera, I can envision some of these things being in sort of a, a brick and timber restaurant style. And at the same time, if you have, a commercial chain, that's doing tenant improvements on a fairly regular basis, that's a nice income source. So I was wondering if that's something that you would target, or if you're choosing rather to not do that.
no, I think we're continually trying to make connections with the designers who are doing restaurant jobs and things like that. Of course, with COVID,
Right.
wasn't any of that happening. 2020, 21. Last year, we finally started seeing some more of that restaurant work again. Where are you going to take that?
Yeah, I'm
Start-
gonna-
Or is it going to take the other computer and start doing a little tour maybe?
Yeah, I'd like, that would be nice to have a tour.
So we'll walk around.
This is your storefront?
So this is our showroom, and it's sort of divided up into maybe 7 alcoves that are little rooms within that have, so we kind of maximize our wall space, and then we have, wall fixtures and ceiling fixtures and all that. So you want to, are you mute? Should I mute Lawrence, and then you can talk from over there? Because you're talking, okay, I'm gonna mute real quick.
So the glass that I'm seeing, is this blown by some of your artisans?
You turn the volume up so I can hear you. We turn your volume down, Christa? Yeah. This is a line of lighting glass that is all made from post-consumer bottles. So we collect these from the recycling center and other restaurants and friends and neighbors.
This is one of the cool ones.
Bring these to us. We collect them, we wash them. And then there's a shop over in North Oakland that does all the cutting and polishing for us.
Maybe you can see a little bit better.
This line of glass is all locally blown in North Oakland by a very talented glass artist. We designed them, but he makes them for us. I hope this isn't too distracting on the moving.
Do you ever have the blower blow on site so people can watch?
That is kind of a dream of ours, but we don't have glass blowing on site. We just have metal working on site. So this glass is made also in Berkeley by a different glass artist who is kind of more of a freeform designer. This glass is made up in Calistoga. It's kiln form glass, so each of the pieces is made to order. We've got a whole set of, I don't know if you can see that, all these colors, and we just make them as they come up. We design them with people. Another line I wanted to show you all today is this set of floor lamps that are made from component parts, kind of post-industrial pieces. And I'd say at least a third of these I picked up at Urban Ore, these component parts. So we've got gears and wheelbases, rotors, some salvage lamp parts, and lighting glass. Yeah, we turned off the overhead lights, so you can't see that as well. I'm gonna go turn that on. Will you maybe show the
Bicycle room? Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna see how I could. Okay, and up here. Oops. There we go. Okay, that is a bicycle rim right there, and that's also bottle glass that's on that. So you source the rims, Lawrence, from the shop down the aquatics.
Aquatic park.
Yeah, aquatic park recycling repair place. So we have that one, and then we have another one over here. Another, oops. Yeah, that one there, that's what has the darker. And then I think Lawrence was talking about this is one of the fixtures that we do that has many of them all 16 shades kind of all cascading down from one canopy. There, that's our high ceiling. The other thing I don't think Lawrence mentioned is that we our whole business is powered by solar. So we have 120 solar panels on the roof, and we are 100% solar powered. And we have been for many, many years, since 13 years in this location. And we also put the solar array on the other location at where Gauman Kitzel is for the 6 years before when we moved from there. So coming up on 20 years of 100% solar powered, which is awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful showroom too.
Thank you.
Do you have competition in your market?
We do, because we have Omega right down the block. We call it co-opetition because
We do too.
because we don't have the same things. We refer people to each other, people kind of come back and forth, get some things from us, some things from Omega. And there's also other lighting stores in Berkeley. Oh yeah, that's good. There's Berkeley Lighting, there's a few lamp shops on Solano. So, there's a fair amount of us here, and we all kind of do different things. So we're all friendly with each other.
And at least our attitude, and it may be the attitude of places also is not everyone's going to like what we do or need what we have, or they may have needs that are things that we don't have. And so we're all really trying to help people find what they need. And so if we don't have it, we're happy to make a referral to the appropriate spot. And then we kind of know what everyone has. So we're happy to get people to the right places without wasting too much of their time.
I ask because I've got a lot of business background, or at least my clientele does. So I'm always interested in who competes with who, how they differentiate themselves, how do they reach their market, and to be successful, you have to be innovative at that. So I'm always interested in the innovative touches that people bring to it. And it sounds like you've got your niche. You're happy with it.
Our niche is really trying to be whatever anyone needs who comes in the door. And I wouldn't say that's highly successful. It's been very interesting, and we're still here 30 years later. So obviously that's working, and people have been very happy with us. I think if we were more innovative in our marketing, we still could do better in whatever sector we choose, but we're kind of working a little bit just a tiny bit in wholesale, a little bit in commercial work, mostly in direct to consumer residential, and some in custom work.
So if that's not successful, what do you think is successful?
Eventually, we would like to retire. And right now, I don't think we're profitable enough that someone would want to either buy the business, or any of our kids would want, we've got three kids, and none of them are really that interested in.
They're all like, that looks like a lot of work for not enough return, mommy and daddy.
We were lucky
That's
enough
okay.
to buy the building we're in 2009. So eventually, if we don't have someone take over from us, we lease it. Yeah.
John, I'd like to say a couple of words if I might.
Sure,
Please.
go ahead.
Yeah, I want to bring it back to the politics for a minute and go from there to some terminology. Because all this really stimulates a lot of thinking on my part. It's been a fascinating discussion, you two, and I think it's just wonderful that what you're doing. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is the West Berkeley plan. And the West Berkeley plan is a long time project that a lot of people have worked on ever since I've been in Berkeley. And the idea of the West Berkeley plan is to preserve industrial and artisanal uses in that part of Berkeley that's west of San Pablo Avenue and all the way north and south. So it includes the City of Berkeley Refuse Transfer Station, for example, and then it's got Urban Ore in it, and it's got your lighting shop in it. All that is part of the West Berkeley plan. And it's been a long and interesting situation here because there are people that want to dismantle it. And what would they do? Instead, they would do things like medical office buildings, and they would do high rises, and they do all sorts of things. But what we've been able to do over the years is to preserve the land use for this type of use. And we do it, among other things, through zoning as well. I mean, I got involved quite a long time ago in redoing the zoning law of West Berkeley because we couldn't move where we are now without changing the zoning rule. And we came up with a term called material recovery enterprise. And we made it as of use. You can put up material recovery enterprise in land zoned mixed use light industrial as of right, due to the change that the city council passed unanimously. Here again, politics. So back to that, let's go back and talk a little bit more about terminology, and I'll just bring up some words here because they're very important to understand from a recycling point of view. You really want to have recycling stuff going into production, and you want to go as high up on the chain, on the value chain as you possibly can. So one of the things we're talking about here, and your example of it, is artisanal production. That means artisans are producing something. So that's what you do when you take a whiskey bottle and you cut the top off and you make it into something that goes into high-end lighting. That's artisanal production. We also, I know, Lawrence, you brought up niche recycling. Well, that's what you're doing. There's another term that's kind of an international term that's real important, and that's called value adding. You're doing that too. You're adding value to things that have lesser value and producing something that has high value. And that in turn feeds back into government, which regulates all this stuff. And then we're back to democracy again.
So can I take the gavel back for a second, Dan?
I'm almost done. Because I want to keep going just in order to say this. There is something called a value added tax in Europe. And so that's part of the taxation structure to value add. Another thing is that you're generating sales tax. And with Urban Ore, for example, it's about $30,000 a month. Then you have property taxes that you're generating. You're also generating employment taxes. And I think one of the things you could do most that would be most helpful to you would be to, first of all, get in touch with the city economic development department. It's a very powerful department. The reason I say that is that they're right outside the city manager's office. They're on the 5th floor of City Hall. And they're in business to help businesses like you do marketing. And they have a lot of ideas about how we can band together to continue to bring people in because of the density of the type of architectural work that goes on in West Berkeley. Thanks.
And virtually every major city and county has an economic development body of some kind. And I know that Dan and I believe that that's really where recycling people need to focus their efforts on, is there as as opposed to the council members. But all this talk about politics feeds into the question I wanted to come back to with Lawrence and Christa, which is, I like to ask business owners this every time, which is, what barriers are there to what you want to do with your business? Sometimes they're regulatory, sometimes they're land use, sometimes they're competition. Do you have barriers, and what are they?
That's an excellent question.
If we want to encourage a circular economy, we want to get the barriers out. So we want to know what barriers you have.
I don't think we have regulatory or land use issues at all. I mean, happily, we bought our property and it's in the perfect spot for, it's zoned for this. It took a little while to get everything approved and through the city, but they were all on board for it. So that hasn't been a problem.
I'd say our biggest barrier of growth is marketing and our lack of marketing knowledge. I started a marketing seminar. I
Yeah,
think
we
will be
get
very
people
helpful.
coming in every day who didn't know we existed before they stumbled upon it. So, yeah.
We also tell people every day we design and build these fixtures and we can change them as they need, and they light up like, oh, really? This is really a special kind of place. And so, but they come in not knowing that. And so we could do a better job of telling
the
that story.
Yeah.
It's like if you build the best mousetrap in the world, it doesn't do you any good unless somebody knows you've got it, right?
Right.
We feel pretty proud about what we built here, the sort of business engine, and all the way that materials come and go here. But yeah, I guess that's our biggest barrier, letting more people know about it.
So in hindsight, are you glad that you've done what you've done as opposed to stay working at Omega Salvage?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's been very rewarding, both in terms of the designs and working with customers and having our own place and being able to retire at some point. It's also
I think
afforded me. Go ahead.
it's been really great being part of a community of artists who make things.
Mm-hmm.
So our glass artists, the other people that we work with who help us make things, or employees that we've had and different artist communities. So that's been fantastic. And being sort of a conduit between our customers and those artists, because a lot of those artists don't want to do the marketing or have a showroom or deal directly with clients, but they really need work, So we've provided a lot of work for for those glass blowers over the last 30 years. It's been pretty awesome. That
Your own economy, really.
right. Yeah.
Well,
This has also afforded me the sort of flexibility in my schedule to do some other things, and one of which was I'm very familiar with the Office of Economic Development. I started this organization called the West Berkeley Design Loop, and we've got a little
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Which also in the spirit of co-opetition, we've brought together the locally owned home improvement merchants and designers and builders and makers, so that we could co-market our neighborhood as a destination for the Bay Area to come to for all of these resources. We haven't really brought a lot of those resources here. All those resources have already existed, but by marketing together, we may have had magnetism for a few of the newer shops to open here.
I think so.
but-
I noticed that, John Gordon, like the realtors will say they're marketing a spot and be part of the West Berkeley Design Loop and things like that. So that's kind of cool. They market it as a destination for home improvement stores, and I think that draws other people to the area. Yeah.
any thoughts or plans about expanding your facility, or you're big enough?
Oh, I think we're big enough. We have 8,000 square feet here.
Wow.
Our showroom is probably a little over 3,000 plus our shop, and then we have office upstairs and inventory, and yeah.
So we still have excess capacity,
yeah, we do.
and we could have more employees or more hours on the clock, but we're doing okay.
Well, I really loved hearing about your business, and I'm thankful that you were able to attend. There's probably questions that I forgot to answer or didn't answer, but I want to open it up to the group in case they can fill in my blanks. So if anybody has questions of Christa and Lawrence, please ask. Susan?
So one of my questions is almost all your sales all local, or do you ship things to other places too?
So we do ship things to other places, and I've noticed that we ship things to people who used to live in the Bay Area and live other places. They know about us that way. So we do ship all over the place, and we have about 5% of our sales or something, I'd say, are through our website. So still most people are coming in or calling us on the phone or talking through things. And about 5% or so are through the website.
Mhm.
It's really hard to sell high quality goods online, or we haven't figured out how to do that. So I think for the quality and price point that we offer, it helps a lot to see them in person and touch them and see the quality
It's true.
of both the materials and the finishes. Plus, we're known as the friendly lighting store, so I think we offer
We
an
are
experience
top.
beyond just
Mhm.
making a purchase. We're building relationships.
Do you try to cultivate advocates for your business in the design and the building community, like, for example, John Gordon?
Sure, absolutely. We work with a lot of architects and interior designers, so we build those relationships. We're going to host a gathering for the American Institute of Architects convention this year is in San Francisco in early June, and we both graduated from architecture school, and we have some friends who are flying in from around the country to go to the convention that went to University of Cincinnati with us. So we're hosting a little gathering here at the store for anyone who's in town for that, and any of our local architect designer people to come and have a gathering here so we can show our showroom off to them and kind of send them out to spread the word about us in other places.
This must seem like a long way from Cincinnati Architecture School.
Not sure. I think what we learned.
Well,
I
we
think
were
it was a
both there
great-
together, so it doesn't seem that different.
It was a great education, no matter what, and it involved a lot of thinking about buildings and all the components and design,
Drawing
drawing
skills.
skills. So
It's just a very quick turnaround. I can sketch something out and our shop will make it in 2 days instead of, drawing and permitting and everything else under this. So that's very gratifying.
Hmm.
Fun.
Maybe you have other questions for Kristen Lawrence? Doug? Doug is our legislative analyst.
I was wondering what Dan's experience with the Office of Economic Development has been like. What have they helped you with that's been useful?
We'll come back to that. Doug had a question and he just
Okay.
unmuted
Sorry.
himself.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the, not so much the lighting, but the fact that you have such a solar array.
Mhm.
And are you participating in net metering whereby you sell your excess back to the grid, or, it's cost effective and it's paid for itself and the whole thing? Are you running on DC or AC?
we don't have any on-site storage. We're grid tied. But with net metering at the end of the year, we've had years when we've owed as much as $300 for the year. But most of the time it's
I think I had a year where we had to pay 500. But mostly it's less than that. And I think last year we got a little bit back.
Hmm.
Or maybe that was 20. We probably in 2020 we got a little bit back because we had to be officially closed for those couple of months from March to June in 2020. So we did not have all the lights on a lot of the time for three whole months there when we were making a lot. But generally kind of right in line with some months we're making more than we use, some months we're making less than we use, and it sort of equals out in the end. And
so what we can say is that our showroom is 100% solar powered. We may not always have enough solar energy to power all of our workshop, but the showroom itself is at least 100%.
for
Go-
solar.
Going back to the closure, Krista, did you get to take advantage of being an essential business as a recycling business?
Oh, it was tricky because there was a little community we could be an essential business because we're providing building materials and hardware stores could be open. But there was some blowback on, Berkeley Lighting, I don't think actually closed. And there was some blowback from community members who were upset about that they were open. And we pretty much closed, but we were open by appointment only for many months. And then we have a very big space here. So we had one person working alone in the shop and one person working in the store, and we're, 45 feet apart and all that. So we were able to sort of continue, but kind of barely for a little bit. And luckily we got 2 PPP loans and that were both forgiven and all of that. So that was really a saving for us.
Have you gotten any kind of sales bump because people are doing more at-home stuff?
We definitely did when we reopened. I saw that because, people weren't, they weren't vacationing. They were improving their house that they were in all the time. So there was definitely some, actually, I'd say 2021 was better. And then 2022 was even better still than 2021.
Okay.
With a dive there.
So Lawrence asked you a question about the Office of Economic Development that I interrupted.
Well, yeah, fine. I just was trying to think of all the ways they've helped, and I'm sure there's many more than this. But one of them was, it was real important. It was about 2 or maybe 3 years ago, and everybody was real worried about us because of the pandemic and all that. And we'd also had kind of flat income for quite a while, and we just weren't doing very well. And they gave us a planner, a woman who was kind of a business expert, very interesting person. Then we started having weekly meetings, and they turned into meetings that eventually produced a strategic plan for the business, which I still have and still refer to and still read from time to time, because it forced us to look at the future and what we were going to be doing, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Mhm.
And we had this person for almost a year, free of charge.
Wow.
Wow.
She would just come once and it was a real high level thing. And our whole senior management team met with her every time.
Wow.
Just really good. Another was, we were coming into our worst part of our year, which is usually around Christmas. People don't, generally speaking, buy used stuff for Christmas presents. So, you come up on Christmas and your sales fall, partly because the weather's bad and all the rest. But anyway, economic development had a relationship going with Berkeley side, and Berkeley side had just hired a brand new reporter who was very competent, and she came and interviewed me and walked around with me and talked to our employees and talked to the customers and produced a really fine article that came out just right around Christmas and boosted our sales measurably at the time. That
Wow.
was another one. And a more recent one.
And that was brought about from Office of Economic Development?
Yeah, they were paying Berkeley side to, I think they were paying part of her salary or something. I'm not sure what the arrangement was, but let's see, now there's just another one. Mary Lou, are you there, Mary Lou? You can help with this. Economic development has helped us just recently, and for some reason I'm blanking on how, but it's a big way that they're helping us. Are you there, Mary Lou? Nope, guess not. Well, I'll see if I can remember it. It'll probably pop into my head at some point.
Okay. Yeah, through the design loop, I'm very familiar with the whole staff at economic development. So I will reach out with this new information and see how else they can help us.
Good. Yeah, I think they're very good. I think it would be really helpful for recyclers to branch out from public works and get real well acquainted with economic development, because the public works people are a bunch of engineers for the most part. It is changing. In Berkeley, it's changed a lot because now we have something called the zero waste division, where it used to be the solid waste division. Talking to a solid waste engineer, they see everything as, okay, this is no good. We'll just smash it all up and make it worthless and make money that way. Because it's regulated and you have to do it, and you can charge $150 a ton and make a lot of money by destroying things. So, but instead we're different. We're all about categories. Engineers really have a hard time with a lot of categories. We have 240 categories of reusable goods that we recognize through our POS system.
Wow.
So it's an extremely complicated system that we have, and it's just way beyond the trained capacity, or sometimes I call it the trained incapacity of solid waste engineers to be able to really see the opportunity that sits right under their noses, but they just don't know how to bring it about. Then among other things, you're also being labor intensive, just like you are, and skill intensive, just like you are. And those are two things also that they don't really know how to manage. What they'd rather do is create gigantic machines that do everything and automate the heck out of everything and get rid of all the labor they possibly can.
Wow.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Hello, Dan. Thank you for bringing up this is Mary Lou. I am here on the phone.
Yep.
Listening while I drive, and Dan mentioned my name, and you wanted me to say something about economic development. We're about to have a meeting with
Well, that's what it is. You got it.
we're about to have a meeting with a consultant that we would like to set up a worker-owned co-op, and we identified years ago. We found the consultant that we wanted. Their name is Project Equity, but we couldn't do it at the time. It couldn't be done because we didn't have enough working capital. So now, actually, because of the pandemic, and also partly because of the PPP loan that we got and that was forgiven, we have working capital. And so now we want to set up our worker-owned co-op. And now the Economic Development Department is apparently going to, actually, John knows more about this than I. Apparently, Economic Development is going to pay for part of the services of this same contractor that we had identified. John, is that right?
You know what I know. That's all I know. I don't know the details of it. She said they had a contract with the city.
Yeah, they're paying probably some sort of monthly stipend or something for them to do this, because the city is on record as wanting to see worker-owned cooperatives as a way of handling what they call the silver tsunami, which is a whole lot of people like us who are getting too old to run the business and don't have successors within the family to take it over. And so for various reasons, in our case, we have two really competent daughters, but they're so competent that they've made a name for themselves in other fields, and they're not about to try to change now. Both of them are extremely successful. So,
Well, and one lives in Australia, so that's kind of a long commute.
yeah, that's right. So anyway, that's what they're doing, is they're funding the conversion of all these businesses that otherwise would probably fold.
Interesting.
And go out of business.
I went to they did a workshop about different employee ownership plans a year or two ago, just different ways to structure that. And I went to that workshop just to learn about it. Employee option programs, just co-op. I forget all the different ways, but
Yeah.
ESOP, yeah.
yeah.
So that was the other thing I was thinking of, and I couldn't bring it up for some reason. Maybe because it's so right under my nose.
We also haven't quite had the meeting yet. John set it up.
So does anybody else have questions for Christa or Lawrence about Metro Lighting? Does anybody want to order lighting from Metro Lighting?
Well, that may be, I don't know. Hello, Lawrence and Christa. This is Mary Lou. I just wanted to say hi. Hi.
Hi, nice to hear your voice.
Nice to hear yours too.
Yeah, you were there in the beginning with the West Berkeley Design Loop meetings, I remember.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
They were
And
talking,
Max had taken over being the liaison for our company, but Max is now gone, so we haven't figured out what to do.
Yeah, that's a big loss for all of us.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
And-
he
and they were
couldn't
talking about-
stand it.
They were talking about the West Berkeley plan back when I was in college in the 70s.
Yeah, when was the last update to the West Berkeley plan? Do you know?
Oh, well, the West Berkeley plan was it finally after something like 20 years of writing and more committee meetings than anybody could stand except Rick Auerbach. Finally, the city council adopted the plan as part of the city's general plan, and it got to be in place for something like 5 years before it phased out. So now it's still in there structurally, but it gets no respect.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I think it has diminished. And it needs energy.
Yes, and there isn't. Rick is sick now, so there's no energy coming from anybody.
There's entropy. Well, hearing no further questions, I'm going to thank Christa and Lawrence for joining us tonight and sharing your story of your business. And I hope it thrives and continues.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation, and it's been enjoyable.
And every
Thank you,
second Tuesday,
John, and thanks to Susan also for your wonderful reading.
Thanks.
Great selection of Mike Anderson.
we do this the second Tuesday of every month at 5:30. So put it on your calendar, take a reminder, and hopefully we'll see you next month for something else that's interesting. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
You all,
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
good night.
Thank you.